everyone, welcome back to Actual English. I'm Jennifer Clyde. It's time for lesson 209 and today's topic is the Red Devils. So we talked about the Taeguk Warriors and today we'll be focusing on the Red Devils. So we all know who the Red Devils are. They are the supporters that are out there cheering for and rooting for our national soccer team. But if you just take a look at the name itself or the title, red, of course, red is the color of our uniform. So red, of course, is obvious. But devil, why are we called devils? You may wonder, because the word devil itself may have a negative meaning to it, because devil itself, what are devils like? They're very mean, they are very evil. But then again, I guess it is just a way of expressing how the supporters for the Korean national soccer team are very strong supporters, very full of energy. We are very strong supporters for the Korean national team. Thus, we are called the Red Devils. So let's focus on what the Red Devils do and what the Red Devils are. Okay, let's begin with today's actual talk conversation.
Kelly, I heard that back in the day you were a little red devil.
Red Devil?
Yeah.
I liked the Red Devils quite a bit.
Ah, so you're talking about the Korean football team?
Yeah.
Ah, you see, it's a little bit complicated, but the team itself is the Taeguk Warriors, and then the fans who dress up in red, you know, and cheer them on, they're the Red Devils.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got confused about that lots of times as well. But the passionate fans with the big flags and the bandanas.
Yeah, that was me.
What you wore, yeah,
Definitely.
You were a Red Devil.
Oh, okay. No, I actually thought that the team, I thought that was a nickname or a term of endearment for the team. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it can be confusing because actually one team in my home country in England, Manchester United, their team is called the Red Devils. So many people think that as well, but it's the fans themselves because they're so passionate here in Korea.
I agree. I understand that sometimes that can go a little bit far. I don't know how it is in your country. In mine, especially with hockey, yeah, I'd say it can go a little bit far. What do you think about here in Korea?
I think it rarely boils over into violence. Well, that's the soccer fans, at least. I mean, they're really got powerful voices and they all sing together. And families are more than welcome as well in those kind of stadiums. But in the UK, yeah, it's famous for maybe 10, 20 years ago, hooliganism, that kind of stuff. If it boils over into violence, then I think, you need to clamp down on that.
In America, I was really surprised to see police officers and very heavy security just to get into the baseball stadium.
Yeah.
So I guess what people have to remember is that they're there to have fun.
Yeah.
And while rivalry is fun, you never want to cross that line where someone can get hurt. That just takes the fun right out of it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, during one of our previous lessons, I did mention something about how a few foreigners are confused about the Taeguk Warriors and the Red Devils, and this is exactly what they mentioned in today's actual talk conversation, and they did focus more on the Red Devils, how some people can go very crazy when cheering for their team, which often happens in the US. I think they even have police officers spread across baseball stadiums at times because violence can break out. But that's hardly ever happened in Korea, and we hope it stays like that. Okay, let's take a look at the conversation. Now, Peter says, Kelly, I heard that back in the day. Do you remember what this means? Back in the day. We're talking about a long time ago, perhaps more than a couple years ago. You were a little red devil, meaning you were a red devil years and years ago. Red devil? She says, I liked the Red Devils quite a bit. So she was a fan of the Red Devils. And then Peter says, so you're talking about the Korean football team? Okay. The reason he asks this question is because he does mention that a certain team is called the Red Devils as well. So he's just making sure who she is referring to as the Red Devils, okay? So once again, he asks, are you talking about? So you're talking about the Korean football team? And Kelly says, yeah, Okay, so she is referring to the Korean national soccer team. Now, here we go. Peter says, you see, it's a little bit complicated, but the team itself is the Taeguk Warriors. Now, we did talk about the Taeguk Warriors, but just to make sure you know what this word means. Warrior itself. A warrior is a very courageous person, okay? And we often call soldiers warriors, okay? So we're talking about very strong individuals, strong competitors, strong soldiers or soccer soldiers that fight for Korea, right? Okay? And then the fans who dress up in red and cheer them on, they're the Red Devils. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, he says, it is a little bit complicated, but, and he explains, the team is the Taeguk Warriors, and then the fans who dress up in red and cheer them on, they are the Red Devils. So that's clear, but let's take a look at this idiomatic expression here. Cheer something or someone on. Now, you can cheer someone on or something on such as a team, and this means to encourage it or encourage someone to do really well, okay? In other words, it just means to cheer for someone. Okay, you cheer on someone or cheer something on as well, okay? So we're talking about the difference between the actual team that's called the Taeguk Warriors and the fans or the supporters that cheer for the Taeguk Warriors, and they are called the Red Devils. It's clear now, right? Okay, let's move on. And then she says, really? Okay. Now, Peter says, yeah, I got confused about that lots of times. So he is admitting that he was confused about the two, or between the two as well. The passionate fans with the big flags and the bandanas, okay? You were a Red Devil. So he's talking about the supporters, the fans. And then moving on, Kelly says, oh, okay, I actually thought that was a nickname or a term of endearment for the team. So now we're not talking about the team. We are clear that the Red Devils, we are talking about the fans and the supporters that cheer on the team. But let's take a look at term of endearment. What is a term of endearment? Term. You may be sure about that, but term of endearment, a term of endearment could be a word. It could also be a phrase that we use to describe a person, an animal, or an intimate object, something or someone that we have affection for, something or someone we love so much that we often give it a name or a phrase to call it. A few examples would be, let's say for example, a term of endearment for a person that you love, let's say your husband or your wife. It's like a nickname you call them. What do you call your wife? What do you call your husband? I call my husband honey, sweetie, okay? So that is a term of endearment, okay? Honey, sweetie, these are all terms of endearment, okay? A word or phrase you would use to describe somebody or something that you have affection for. Moving on. Now, Peter says, well, it can be confusing. Why? Because actually one team in my home country in England, which team? Manchester United. Their team is called the Red Devils. You see? So the supporters for the Korean national soccer team are called the Red Devils, but also in England, Manchester United, the team itself, is called the Red Devils. That's why he's saying it could be confusing, okay? So many people think that as well. Many people think that it's the name of the Korean national team. But it's the fans themselves, because they're so passionate here in Korea. Now, this is something that I mentioned earlier on. Why devils, right? Because devils, they're not exactly devils because they're evil, of course not. But we are calling our supporters of the Korean national soccer team the Red Devils because they are so passionate, they're so powerful, and they're very strong fans and supporters. That's where the name comes from. I believe, it's my opinion. Moving on. Now, Kelly says, I agree. I understand that sometimes that can go a little bit far. Okay? If you say something goes a bit far, you're saying that something is taken overboard. It goes over the limit. Okay? And she says, I don't know how it is in your country. So she says, especially with hockey. Okay? She's talking about a different sport. As an example, with hockey, it can go a little bit far. Okay, what do you think about here in Korea? So once again, if something goes far, you're saying it goes overboard. You are doing too much of something. Perhaps supporters or fans of a certain team may get into fights with each other. Now you are going far. In terms of just supporting for your team, sometimes violence can happen. So that is what she is talking about. But the point is, what do you think about here in Korea? Is it different, she asks, and let's find out. He says, I think it rarely boils over into violence. If something boils over, or if someone boils over, you're saying that that person gets extremely angry and violent in some cases. So he's saying sometimes it does go overboard. Let's say, for example, you have a pot of water and you put it on the stove and you turn it on to boil the water. But once it comes to a boil, you may add a few ingredients. But if the water boils over, what happens? That's trouble, right? So he's talking about that. But it boils over into violence. So violence can happen. He says, I mean, they've really got powerful voices and they all sing together. We're talking about the Red Devils. And families are more than welcome as well in those kinds of stadiums. We're talking about the soccer stadiums. So here in Korea, families, moms and dads, they take their children to the soccer stadiums to cheer for the national team. Why? Because it's safe. So it rarely boils over into violence in Korea. Okay, you'll rarely see violence in Korea at these soccer stadiums. So a lot of families take their children there. And of course, Kelly says absolutely. She agrees. Moving on. But in the UK, okay, let's talk about the UK. He says it's famous for, it's well known for, it's popular for, maybe 10, 20 years ago, hooliganism and that kind of stuff. So hooliganism, what is this? We're talking about violence, okay? Destructiveness sometimes. And in slang, we refer to, let's say, very rough and lawless young people that always break the law. That cause a lot of violence here and there, that fight all the time. We call young people that always cause destruction hooligans as well. That's just a slang term to call them, and we're talking about all the violence that can break out, hooliganism, okay? And then he says, if it boils over into violence, then you need to clamp down on that. This is another pattern for today. Clamp down on something means to stop something or to limit something. Now, police can clamp down on certain things. We'll take a look. It's a sample sentence for clamp down on, but simply for now, just keep in mind, if it boils over into violence, then you need to clamp down on that. Means you need to stop it. You need to limit that so that violence does not break out. Okay, so that it does not boil over into violence. Okay, moving on. Now, Kelly says, in America, I was really surprised. Now, she's talking about America. I was really surprised to see police officers and very heavy security, okay, just to get into the baseball stadium. She's mentioning that she once in America was trying to walk into a baseball stadium, and she was surprised to see police officers and heavy security all over the place, okay? So she says, so I guess what people have to remember is that they are there to have fun. They're there at these soccer stadiums, baseball stadiums, to cheer their teams on and just to really have fun. So that is what she's saying. It's not about fighting. It's not about violence. It's not about, I guess, harming your harming your opposing team's supporters or fans. It's about cheering for your team and about having fun at these stadiums or at these places. So that is her point. And then, of course, let's move on. She says, and while rivalry is fun, we're talking about competition, rivalry, competition. While competition is fun, you never want to cross that line. Once more, cross the line means to go overboard, okay? Where somebody can get hurt. That just takes the fun right out of it. If you say that something takes the fun out of something, you're saying that it ruins something. It destroys something, okay? It ruins the fun of the game. It ruins the point of it. So she's saying, you know, competition is fun, but you never want to go overboard. You don't want to go over that line or the boundaries or that limit and cause violence, because by doing so, you're only going to ruin the fun. You're going to take the fun right out of it. And of course, Peter agrees by saying absolutely. So today we're talking about the Red Devils, everyone, and of course, sports games. Let's take a listen to the conversation one more time.
Kelly, I heard that back in the day you were a little Red Devil.
Red Devil?
Yeah.
I liked the Red Devils quite a bit.
Ah, so you're talking about the Korean football team?
Yeah.
Ah, you see, it's a little bit complicated, but the team itself is the Taeguk Warriors, and then the fans who dress up in red, you know, and cheer them on, they're the Red Devils.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got confused about that lots of times as well. But the passionate fans with the big flags and the bandanas,
that was me.
What you wore, yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
You were a Red Devil.
Oh, okay. No, I actually thought that the team, I thought that was a nickname or a term of endearment for the team. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it can be confusing because actually one team in my home country in England, Manchester United, their team is called the Red Devils. So many people think that as well, but it's the fans themselves because they're so passionate here in Korea.
I agree. I understand that sometimes that can go a little bit far. I don't know how it is in your country. In mine, especially with hockey, yeah, I'd say it can go a little bit far. What do you think about here in Korea?
I think it rarely boils over into violence. Well, that's the soccer fans, at least. I mean, they're really got powerful voices and they all sing together. And families are more than welcome as well in those kind of stadiums. But in the UK, yeah, it's famous for maybe 10, 20 years ago, hooliganism and that kind of stuff. If it boils over into violence, then I think, you need to clamp down on that.
In America, I was really surprised to see police officers and very heavy security just to get into the baseball stadium.
Yeah.
So I guess what people have to remember is that they're there to have fun.
Yeah.
And while rivalry is fun, you never want to cross that line where someone can get hurt. That just takes the fun right out of it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's now time for actual expressions, everyone. Let's go over a few of the vocab words we found in today's actual talk conversation, as well as some idioms and phrases. We'll practice with some patterns and sample sentences. Here we go with the word warrior. It's not warrior, it's W-O. It's like warrior, okay? Warrior. And some synonyms are fighter, hero, champion, and as I mentioned as well, a soldier can be called a warrior. It's a person that has a lot of courage and aggressiveness, okay? So definitely the soccer players fighting for the Korean team are warriors. They're called Taeguk warriors. What about term of endearment? Just to help you really have a better understanding of that, I'll give you some examples. Honey is an example of a term of endearment. Sweetheart, cutie pie, darling, dear. These are all terms of endearment, okay? A word or a phrase you would use to describe a person or a thing or an intimate object that you have affection for. Okay, let's move on. We've got hooliganism. Hooliganism, and we're talking about disorder, violence, disruptive behavior. And we often call young kids or young people that always break the law. They are called hooligans. Hooligans. H-O-O-L-I-G-A-N-S. A hooligan or hooligans in the plural form, okay? That's slang, so keep that in mind. And rivalry. I chose this word because it's tricky to pronounce. It's rivalry. rivalry. 2 more times. Rivalry. Rivalry. Very good. And is a synonym for competition or a race or even a matchup. Okay? So that about does it for today's words. Let's move on to 3 patterns for today. We've got cheer someone or something on. Okay? You are encouraging something or encouraging someone to do well in what they're doing right now. Okay? Let's take a look at our first sample sentence. The Red Devils cheered on the national soccer team from start to end. Meaning from the beginning to the very end of these games, okay? One more sentence is, the crowd cheered them on, but they lost. This often happens too. So you can say A cheered on B, or as you see in the second sample sentence, A cheered B on, okay? So the order can be switched slightly. It can work both ways. Our second pattern is boil over with something. This means to erupt in great anger, okay? Here is a sample sentence. The crowd's passions boiled over in just a matter of minutes. So if you say passions boiled over, it does not necessarily mean violence or anger, okay? You can say that something became so great. Their passion became so great, but oftentimes it can mean to erupt in great anger. Moving on to our final pattern. It means to, To stop something or to limit something, to clamp down on something. Okay? Keep this in mind, and a sample sentence is, police officers are everywhere at baseball stadiums where? In the US. Why? To clamp down on violence. Clamp down on something means to stop something, to limit something. So this is rare in Korea, but often, as Kelly mentioned, in America, okay, in the US, police officers can be everywhere. Why? To clamp down on violence, to stop violence, or to limit violence. So please do practice these patterns and these vocab words more on your own. Job well done.